How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji. Welcome to another episode of Tear Talk. Hey guys, today we're going to discuss when the system fails twice, the Emmanuel Haro case. Now, yesterday I did a great video of when the title of parent, mother, father could be weaponized, how we could draw sympathy. This is going to be more related to the questions that came my way soon after the video, and it was about what happened here, where are the failures, and they're really focused on Jake Haro's past. So I did some research, made some phone calls. It's funny because the more questions that you ask, or the more questions you get back. So I think this is really to start a dialogue. Maybe it's a dialogue that hasn't really been discussed before. And that's the goal for today's show. Now, you guys, I'm sure, are well aware of this news because it is getting national attention. But I want to focus more on this gentleman today. So let's do that. That's Jake Haro. May have a better picture of him. Maybe this will work better. That's Jake Haro. So in 2018, Jake Haro nearly killed his 10-week-old daughter, Promise, leaving her permanently disabled and unable to see, walk, or talk. Despite the severity of her injuries, multiple broken bones, skull fractures, and brain hemorrhage, Haro served only 180 days in jail. 7 years later, his 7-month-old Emmanuel is missing and presumed murdered. And that's him right now. Now, as of the most recent update, I believe there was enough evidence collected in and around the house to definitely push for the murder charges. And now it's just a wait process to see what has been found. But a lot of people are looking at, could this have been prevented? I mean, that's what kind of happens in these gaps, right? When we're trying to figure out what happened, a lot of people now start looking at, is there anything that could have been prevented? Could we have done something to save this child? So this case exposes critical gaps in how our legal system handles severe child abuse. We examine what could have been done differently within existing laws, what legal reforms might prevent similar tragedies, and why dangerous parents often slip through the cracks to harm more children. Now, guys, there's a lot of questions I asked today. I made some phone calls to a couple of friends of mine who are police officers. One person is actually a lawyer, and there are some gaps here. So I figure we'll go through a little bit of what we discussed, and then I got some questions at the end that I don't really have an answer for, but I'm going to put them out there, and then maybe a good discussion could happen where we just kind of hit up the comments, and you never know basically what can change based on the comments that we put in. So let's talk first about the crime against his daughter, Promise. So again, we're going to be talking about Jake Haro today. Yesterday, when we did a show, we focused more on the wife, but today I want to focus on Jake. So in 2018, when his daughter Promise was only 10 weeks old, Jake Mitchell Haro, I think his middle name is Mitchell, inflicted severe abuse that left her permanently disabled. Medical findings at I have Loma Linda University Medical Center revealed multiple fractured ribs, 1 acute, 6 healing, skull fracture, brain hemorrhage, swelling of the neck, fractured leg bone, which was healing at the time, and the pattern of injury suggested ongoing abuse over time, not a single incident. Promise survived, but was left permanently disabled. She cannot see, talk, or walk, and as a result of abuse, I believe she only has 3% of her brain that is working. And what was unique was when they went into the house and they did digital forensics where they kind of looked to see, searches, pings, all that stuff. They found that Jake was actually searching how to feed a baby with broken ribs. At least that's what I saw from one of the news outlets. Okay, so the legal response. So Haro was arrested in 2018, but the case took years to resolve. He was charged with felony child cruelty under California Penal Code 273A. Now, the key issue is, despite the severity of injuries, prosecutors did not pursue attempted murder charges. And I believe in June of 2023, Haro pleaded guilty to willful child cruelty. His sentence was only 180 days in jail plus 48 months probation. That's what came my way. If that's different, let me know. But that seems to be what was consistently found when I was searching. He served his time and was released with minimal ongoing supervision. So now there are some constraints here. So this is when we're talking about, so you have child abuse. And the reason why I believe it was settled into child cruelty is because it's hard for them to improve. It's hard for them to prove that the intent was to kill the child. So it's hard to get the attempted murder charge. So proven intent to kill is difficult in infant abuse cases, even with severe injuries. Plea bargain pressure. So California courts rely heavily on plea deals to manage caseloads. And then the charge classification. Child cruelty charges carry lighter sentences than violent felonies, even when the harm is severe. So again, if they would have went for the attempted murder, I believe the prosecution may have thought, hey, we may not be able to prove that because that's intent. That's harder to prove. So what is something that we can get them on? And they got him on child cruelty. I mean, to be honest with you, maybe they should have took this to trial and gave it a shot. But with that said, child cruelty is a lesser offense. So now with child cruelty, here's the unique thing. So now how you have for sex offenses, you have it's a registered offense. You don't have that for child abusers. There is no child abuser registry. So unlike sex offenders, child abusers aren't tracked through a centralized registry system. Parental rights. Haro's parental rights to promise were likely terminated, but this didn't prevent him from having more children. And then there's child protective service limitations. Child protective services typically responds to new reports rather than maintaining lifelong monitoring of dangerous parents. And maybe someone from CPS, if they see this, they can maybe talk about that a little bit. But here, I wanted to mention with the parental rights, people have been asking questions like, hey, Ganji, well, then how could he have more children? And how could this happen again with another child? And the basic thing here is there is nothing that at this point that could affect his parental rights. So again, Haro's parental rights to promise were likely terminated, but this doesn't prevent him from having more children. That just deals with him and promise, his first child. So this is what some of the thoughts was when I talked to my friends to see what could have been done under current laws. They do believe prosecutors could have pursued attempted murder charges despite the difficulty. Judges had discretion to impose longer sentences with statutory guidelines, and enhanced probation conditions could have included no unsupervised contact with children. So some legal reforms. You create a child abuser registry similar to sex offender registries. That was mentioned my way. Mandatory enhanced sentences for severe child abuse cases, and automatic CPS monitoring for future children of convicted child abusers. So that maybe there's the balance. If I can't stop them from having children, then maybe we got to put them on a system where they have to be monitored. And again, that's always the balance. You know, it's funny in the legal world, we always got to find balance. People look at rights as absolute, but sometimes those rights could affect others. So we have to put balances in play to make sure that the pressure to push for this person's rights doesn't ultimately affect someone else's rights. Because remember, whatever's written on paper could be bastardized into someone else's own selfish gain. And then cross-jurisdictional information sharing to track dangerous parents. I want to talk about the Emmanuel case just briefly, the one from 2025. So after his release, Jake Haro began a relationship with Rebecca Haro. They had 2 children together, Emmanuel born 2024 and another child now 2 years old. And again, this comes from what I've searched. The family lived without a parent, CPS oversight, or monitoring. In 2025, 7-month-old Emmanuel disappeared under suspicious circumstances. That just happened this month in August. Jake and Rebecca Haro were arrested on suspicion of murder. Only after Emmanuel's disappearance did CPS remove their surviving 2-year-old from their home. So the pattern here is in 2018, promise permanently disabled by Jake Haro. 2023, you have a light sentence, minimal monitoring. 2024, 2025, new children born to the same perpetrator. And then 2025, Emmanuel presumed murdered, another child endangered. So then you ask yourself, what does this case reveal about the system, the limitations of the system? So I mentioned constitutional rights. You know, parents have fundamental rights to custody and procreation. Procreation's key. The due process can't punish someone for future crimes they haven't committed. That's why I talked about the balance has to come in play. And everything's costly. I get it. But there's always going to be some level of balance. It's funny. Sometimes we speed through something just in an effort to get it done, not realizing that, you know, it's not really over yet. if we just maybe gone through the first part. I think sometimes people should always see things as something that could possibly continue. I mean, we doing corrections, right? Problem may be resolved, but we always say resolved for now. What do we do to make sure this doesn't happen again? I think sometimes, especially with caseloads like this, which I'm sure are heavy, resolve, move to the next one. And well, what happens to the end? Well, we moved over. We're on to the next one now. Jurisdictional issue. Different counties may not share information effectively. That's why that registry would be good for people that are noted as child abusers, but that could be a heavy caseload too. I mean, I don't know how many people are charged with those crimes. And resource limitations. CPS and courts are overwhelmed with current cases. That's what we talked about. So where are the gaps in protection? So there's no mechanism for lifelong monitoring. Once probation ends, dangerous parents often disappear from oversight. So, I mean, who knows right now how many victims we have. Information silos, so new partners may not know about previous child abuse convictions. So that's a good question to ask if she knew. But either way, I mean, she invented a story. Whatever it was, she was definitely doing something that would benefit him if he was the main person doing it, or maybe it was her. I mean, you never know, but this was definitely something that was, I believe, even if it happened in the moment, they definitely tried to cover it up. And there's malice in that. That's the afterthought. Information silos, new partners may not know about previous child abuse convictions. Talked about that. And then reactive versus proactive systems. System waits for new abuse reports rather than preventing them. And again, this is coming from the people I spoke to. So here's some solutions I thought from who I spoke to. So we talked about the child abuse registry. So there's a pro, would alert partners, landlords, schools to dangerous individuals. But the con is constitutional concerns, potential for rehabilitation, and privacy rights. But again, it's funny because if you're aware of this and then you commit a crime like that and that happens, we're only reacting. You're the one that caused your rights to be violated. Sometimes I hate when you try to hold someone accountable, your effort to hold them accountable becomes controversial. It's like, no, they opened that wall. They opened that door. Now we have a job to do, and I'm sorry, we wouldn't be doing this if you didn't do what you did. We're just reacting. We're not just coming in deciding to take away people's rights. We're coming in because we have to. Enhanced monitoring. The pro could catch warning signs early. The con, expensive, resource intensive, and potential for overreach. So maybe there could be some way for grants or something, money that can come into play that can help with developing a better system for oversight. And then automatic CPS involvement. Pro would provide oversight of new children. Con, presumption of guilt, burden on already overwhelmed system. So that's the tough one because, even if you make an effort to rehabilitate, people are like, well, let me ask you a question. When you rehabilitate them, do you 100% trust them? It's a process. And I wouldn't say I 100% trust anyone. You never know what people are willing to do when pressured or willing to fall back to when it's an impulsive behavior that they just cannot control. So when it's monitored, we're able to help balance that control. So I don't think it's always going to be a presumption of guilt, but rather, hey, I'm here to help you. So if you want to take it as a punitive measure, then of course, but we're going to say, well, it's a presumption of guilt. You're coming after them. But what about if you take it as a rehabilitative measure? I'm here to help. I know you have some concerns. We work through it, but it's always an ongoing process. Let's make sure we're continuing to work through it. I just don't like when people put so much pressure on everything being punitive when technically maybe it's more of an assistance. It's like every time you have something that you want to create, people bastardize it by making it seem like it's punished. It's punitive when it's not. Again, so if I was CPS, hey, I'm not looking to, hold you punitive. No, I'm looking to help you get through the process because we know you've had concerns before. So maybe now that you're trying to work through this new family, we're going to assist you in any way because, again, at any moment people can fall back to what they know best. So we're here to help. So give them that resource. And also that resource gives them no excuse. Sometimes people try to avoid the people that are there to help because they think, well, I'm not going to call them because they're going to hold me accountable. No, they're here to help. But yes, they're also here to hold you accountable, but they're here to help. So the moment you don't utilize those resources, that's also on you because you're more concerned about judgment than doing the right thing. So I had some questions. These are the questions that I'm going to throw out to you guys, see if you guys come up with some answers because this is, I think, really where the center of the debate is. So basically, the first question is, how do we balance constitutional rights with child protection? So it's parental rights versus child safety. I think we discussed this a little bit, but should previous child abuse convictions limit the right to have more children? Kind of touched on that a bit. Due process concerns. Can we restrict someone's freedoms based on crimes they might commit in the future? And again, there's monitoring play there, but it's not so much about restricting their rights, but how do we work together? I mean, yes, if they mess up, yeah, we're going to do what we got to do, but maybe the first attempt should be more to assist. So it's not looked at as a restriction of rights. Constitutional precedents. How do sex offenders registries survive legal challenges, and could similar models work for child abusers? And I think with sex offenders, they know that these are compulsive acts that are very hard to control. You talk to anybody that works with sex offenders, they'll tell you that really you're trying to help them control the compulsion, but you're not going to try to heal them. They can't. So they try to help them control it. Again, but these are professionals that will tell you, I'm not going to trust them with my children either, but we try to manage their compulsions, and they do allow supervised oversight, all this stuff. And maybe the same thing could be for people that are child abusers. Maybe they, again, I'm not excusing them, trust me. I'm not minimizing what they've done, but if we want to approach another level where we could start doing stuff like that, then you showcase that it's more about rehabilitative and also safety concerns, because if someone is quick to violence, a baby crying could be a problem. So they may need a resource that they can go to help calm them down before they start flipping out. I think the biggest concern here is that they're afraid that when they make the call for help, that's going to be about judgment. And the next thing you know, that they're going to get in trouble. And they should actually see it first as a resource. And maybe we should paint a better picture of that. Again, I'm not trying to minimize what they're doing or what they have done, but if we have to get ahead of it without violating their rights to some extent, then we have to show that this is more of a resource, but does have accountability connected to it. International comparisons. How do other democracies handle repeat child abusers while protecting civil liberties? And slippery slope arguments. So where do we draw the line between protection and just slightly, I guess, authoritarian? I know what this word is, guys, but authoritarianism. Like basically, like I'd always think of a Hitler regime. Somewhere where it's complete authority and I demand and you comply. So again, I think we mentioned where I believe the balance would be, but I'd love to get your thoughts on that. Now, resource allocation. Should society invest more in monitoring known child abusers? So again, everything's costly. So cost-benefit analysis. What's the financial cost of monitoring versus the cost of child abuse consequences? Medical care, disability service, criminal justice. So you have to look at, okay, well, we could do this preventively, or later on, we're going to have to pay for all this, the criminal justice system. If the child's permanently harmed, medical costs, all that stuff. I mean, there's money being spent somewhere. So whether you spend the money now or you spend it later, what do you think would be the best bet? And I think always preventive. Sometimes people, the way they look at the system is, if I don't have to spend money now, I look good. But yeah, then you wind up pushing other concerns later on, and someone's going to have to handle that mess. So why don't we get ahead of it now, spend the money, and then later on we could talk about how much was saved since we put all this in play. But that requires long-term thinking. That requires people that are in positions longer than a few years, because some of the stuff that we need to implement, it doesn't start in a day or two. It takes a while for it to work its course. Staff and reality. So again, CPS and probation departments are already overwhelmed. Where would additional resources come from? And again, that would be a great partnership there. You can get volunteers as long as they're screened through a background check. I mean, prisons are very, we're understaffed, so we sometimes get the help of volunteers when it comes to services and programs. They just go through a heavy filter, and there's a lot of people that want to help out. But again, they go through a strict filter system, a strong background check, and they help us maintain what we got to maintain. So maybe the same thing can be done here. But again, they still got to have oversight. They're always going to be a coordinator, but you never know the people that may want to volunteer for this that could be extremely helpful. You could have people that are retired that may want to come back in and help because they love what they do. They're connected to the job for personal reasons. Technology solutions. Could GPS monitoring, social media tracking, or other tech tools reduce costs while improving oversight? Public versus private funding. Should monitoring be government funded, or could insurance, healthcare systems contribute? I think it should be something. I mean, I don't mind other parties getting involved, but it's got to have some level of government oversight. So I think it should be a partnership effort. But ultimately, you got to have the main level of responsibility should be towards something government funded or government oversight. Success metric. How would we measure if enhanced monitoring actually prevents abuse? Well, you have to go. That's always tough because that's, you really can't prove what didn't occur. And sometimes that's always the tough bet. Like, we have a lot of heroes every day that prevent things that you'll never know about. But having said that, somewhere along the line, as years pass, you'll see a difference in the numbers. At one point we had all these, let's say in corrections, at one point we had all these assaults, and the last 5 years, our numbers have dropped dramatically. Something's being done right in comparison to the last 5 years. So again, it takes a long time. It's not something that happens overnight, but success could be measured by, where we were before to where we are now. As long as you know what you're looking for, you can see the difference. So if you got less kids going to the hospital, less cases where kids are missing and being killed, you could see that. You just gotta. It's just tough because, as I said, the preventing of something just never gets seen, because how do you know? But it's happening. I always tell people, even in corrections, success is not about nothing happening. Like today was a great day, nothing happened. No, it's everything happened that was right, because we did what we need to do to make sure nothing happened. I don't leave success in the hands of something I cannot control. Success today wasn't because the inmates allowed it to be successful. Success was done today because we did what we had to do to get the job done. So same thing here. Success was done because we actively were involved in that success. So then I got number 3 was the prosecution accountability. Should there be consequences when prosecutors choose lighter charges in severe abuse cases? So, I mean, there is discretion with prosecution. So is the current system of unchecked prosecution discretion or prosecutor discretion appropriate for child abuse cases? Then there's the performance metrics. Should prosecutors be evaluated on conviction rates, sentence lengths, or recidivisms of offenders they plea bargain? And that's a good question, because right now we're leaning a lot towards rehabilitation. But having said, there are crimes that there needs to be a level of accountability, because it's about preventing them from doing it again. That's the concern. People could be very impulsive, and they could tell you one thing and then later on just totally change that script. And now you're left there like, oh, but he promised, stop. Of course he promised. He was in survival mode. So I think in this case here, yes, rehabilitation is a great part, but we cannot alleviate accountability or some level of punitive measures that deters the person from wanting to ever do that again. So a good sentence would have mattered, I think, a little bit on this. But with that said, you guys are the experts, hit me up. Let me know what you think. Victim impact. Should families like promises have more to say in plea negotiations? I agree. But that sometimes is tough too, because everybody seems to have a different opinion on what needs to be done. So we have to try to work on that together, really listen to the victim, see what they want, and try to find somewhere where we can meet them in the middle. It's not about them coming to us, but rather us going to them. Electoral accountability. Do voters have enough information to hold elected prosecutors accountable for lenient sentences? And mandatory minimums. Would mandatory minimum sentences for severe child abuse remove dangerous discretion or create new injustice? So that's always good too. Sometimes you have that mandatory sentencing because that's what it is. There's no discretion. And sometimes the victims like that, because the victims know if someone commits a crime, they're at least getting this. That cannot be negotiated. So now all I have to do is now fight for what they're being charged, make sure the evidence is there, and make sure they get charged with that offense that has that type of mandatory sentencing. And I used to think, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe someone could follow up, but child abuse is an act of violence that I would think would fall under some type of 85% law, no early release act. But I'm not really that fluid with that. But if you guys know, let me know. And last thing I got is information sharing. What barriers prevent better communication between agencies and jurisdictions? So privacy laws, unfortunately, Does HIPAA and other privacy protections sometimes shield dangerous parents from scrutiny? Jurisdictional gaps. I mean, how to abuse and exploit moves between counties, states, or countries to avoid oversight. I think if you had a national registry, you wouldn't have to, that wouldn't be a concern. Technology barriers. Are different agencies using incompatible computer systems that prevent information sharing? And legal liability. Are agencies afraid to share information due to potential lawsuits? And interagency politics. Do turf wars between CPS, police, courts, and probation departments harm information flow? And it's funny. I think there would be less fights if people realize that we're here to help each other, including the person that you may be trying to protect. Maybe there's a way, by still holding people accountable, we can approach it with a different perspective. And then I got the prevention versus reaction. Can the system become more proactive without violating rights? So could AI or data analysis identify high-risk situations before abuse occurs? Should certain behaviors, domestic violence, substance abuse, previous CPS involvement, trigger automatic monitoring of new children? Talked about that. Community involvement. How can neighbors, teachers, healthcare workers be better trained and empowered to spot and report warning signs? And presumption of innocence. How do we maintain this principle by being more productive about child protection? And false positives. What happens when proactive measures wrongly target innocent families, and how do we minimize this harm? You know what the funny thing is? I'd rather be wrong than right and not do nothing. So sometimes that becomes a thing where what if I'm wrong and now I embarrass? No, there's ways to do it discreetly. You don't have to put everything out there, media. If I think Anthony's done something wrong, but maybe he hasn't, but the child has some bruises that I'm worried about, then maybe we could do something discreetly. But then all of a sudden, if the media finds out about something discreetly, they now go ahead and broadcast it. No, maybe there are things that can be done during that process where you protect the person's being accused while you're looking into it. I think the reason why it becomes a concern is people are afraid, well, when you make the announcement, everybody's going to know. Now we're violating that. Well, maybe that we could control that a little bit. Investigations should be held with a bit of integrity. If someone is being accused of something, they do have rights that should be protected, because what if we're wrong? I get it. But we're not the one running out with that information. It's usually people pushing for transparency right away. And when it's not there, well, I can't trust the system. Guys, it's not ready to be released. We're still looking at everybody. And I don't want people running around saying, hey, our effort to look at Anthony now makes him the person who did it. Now Anthony's pissed off because his rights are being violated. No, we're doing what we're supposed to do. Someone else dropped his name, and now he's being targeted by all this hate. So I guess the bottom line here is Emmanuel's case represents a preventable tragedy. The system had clear warning signs from Promise's case in 2018, but legal constraints, resource limitations, and systematic gaps allowed Jake Haro to endanger more children. While some limitations may be necessary in a constitutional democracy, the case highlights urgent needs for reform in how we track, monitor, and prevent repeat child abuse offenses. So the question isn't just about what went wrong, but what realistic changes could prevent similar tragedies while respecting legal rights and working within system constraints. Guys, there's a lot here to discuss. It's in there. It's in this dialogue. Comment, man. Let's load it up. Let's see where this discussion goes. You never know. Maybe we can form another dialogue off this. What we discuss here could save lives. As always, guys, the show is Tear Talk. Stay safe.